It's time to strap in for another edition of the CarsGuide Podcast, the show that takes you beyond the test drive. This is episode number 222, the Richie Benno episode. Chew, chew, chew. What annoys us about modern cars? What annoys us most about modern cars? I'm CarsGuide Deputy Editor James Cleary, and joining me in looking at the features and functions that drive us nuts, Managing Editor, Head of Video, Matt Campbell.
Hello, everyone.
And key contributing journalist, Steve Ottley.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We'll also take a look at the fresh metal we've been driving this week and dive into your feedback. YouTubers, you can jump ahead to each annoyance we'll be talking about and each section of the show via the time codes in the notes or chapter markers in the timeline. So let's get after it. Matt, you posted a Facebook poll this week asking people to vote on a set of pet peeves coming from the editorial team about modern cars. And the response was so strong with literally thousands of votes.
Yeah.
It stood up as a red hot topic for the podcast. So we're going to each cough up with the things that annoy us most and see where we get to, kind of one each around the panel. But Matt, kick us off by telling us about the poll and then hit us with your first annoyance.
Okay, so it was on our YouTube community post. So if you're not a YouTube subscriber, you might not have seen it. But if you are, thank you for subscribing. And if you're not, subscribe, please, so then you can get in on the act. So I just put up, this was a week ago, we have a few pet peeves in the CarsGuide offices, but what annoys you most? And so I chose a few things that I think are annoying, and I've noticed other people point out as annoying in our team, being halogen headlights and or halogen daytime running lights as the first option, an actual key for the actual ignition being another thing, fake exhaust tips or worse, exhaust-shaped bits on EVs, which garnered the highest percentage of votes. It was 45% of people think that was the most annoying thing. Then there's slow electric boot operation, or other. And in the other section, I put comment below, and we had 75 comments from people whinging about things that annoy them about modern day cars. So,
unreal. Yeah,
we've had a good response.
That's good. So kick us off with the first one on that list.
Well, it's my one. Halogen headlights and or halogen daytime running lights. I look at modern day Mazdas in particular that run LED headlight and a halogen daytime running light, which is the reverse of what a lot of the other brands do. They have an LED daytime running light or a halogen headlight. Hyundai and Kia have been known to do this with a lot of their new cars that have come out. Like you look at a Kia Stonic, for example, Seltos. The Seltos has got the top spec model is the only one with the LED lights. And the lower grade models have halogen lights and halogen daytime running lights. And it just cheapens the look of the car, it dates it. I think LED lighting, not only is it more aesthetically pleasing and does capture the attention of pedestrians. And that's why daytime running lights were designed so that the pedestrians on the street could see a car coming, because cars can be grey and get lost in the road or lost in traffic, and you walk out in front of a car, and if you don't see that it's got a light shining at you, and an LED light is typically a lot brighter and a lot crisper and sharper and more noticeable, that's why these things exist. And the LED lights also, not only are they good looking and safer, they are better at lighting up the road ahead of you. And there is a downside to the LED daytime running lights in that you often see people driving around at night who have just the running lights on because they've got the car on the switch for the lights is on the lowest setting rather than on auto or whatever it might need to be.
Yeah. And idiots. I've done that many times.
Yeah, I've done it too. You do it, but then you're driving on the freeway and you're like, everything's dark.
Yeah. That's right.
And then you turn on the halogen headlights and you go, everything's still dark.
Oh, you know what? I'd take a small wager that LED lights now are probably cheaper to produce than halogen lights.
Well, I guess that would be my counterpoint to that. Is I guess a lot of it is driven by cost, right? If they can just make it a little bit cheaper for those base models, that's one of those cost savers. And I guess because if you think about it from an automotive point of view, you're sitting inside the car, so you're not looking at the headlights. Mm-hmm. So,
but I think it's one of those things.
Probably think they can sneak through.
Yeah.
where the perceived value is high, but the actual cost to the manufacturer, I reckon, is getting lower by the minute. So they can still charge a premium for LEDs, but it's probably not costing a lot.
I wonder what the stockpile is like for halogen lights, and that's why we still get them. And, you know, like one of the
It's just a mountain of halogen headlights somewhere in Thailand.
One of the comments on the poll was that LED lights should be standard. They should be like an ADR. And, you know, I tend to agree. I think that the existing lighting technology that's been around since candles is just not good enough.
Yeah, well, there's a federal election rolling around, Matt, maybe you'll stand on the halogen light party.
I just want to point out that I didn't need this poll to know that this was Matt's pet peeve, because I've spent more than 5 minutes with him, and it doesn't take that much longer than that for this to come up.
That's a good Steve. Start. That's a good start, Steve. We'll move to yourself. What's your first one off the rank?
Well, keen Cars Guide readers will know this because I wrote an opinion piece about it only a few weeks ago, so feel free to check that out. Buttons, the lack of a physical button. This move towards, you know, this great irony of we're trying to make cars safer and make them more integrated with your smartphone, because we don't want people playing with their phones when they're driving, because that's very dangerous. So we basically make the car's infotainment system a giant phone. So it's a touch screen. So you've got to physically look at what you're touching. You can't just like do it by, you know, sense and touch. And, you know, the old, like, you know, so many cars now, like, just to turn up the volume on the stereo, you've got to go into a touch screen, or, you know, like I think it's interesting. It's interesting. There has been, I think, a little bit of a kickback in the last few years. I think some brands went a little bit too far and realized, oh, okay, well, we definitely need to have a volume button, you know, a play pause button, you know, there's certain buttons that people really, really want. But overall, like there's just been too many cars that look like
it's like the designers winning the day, isn't it? And the double whammy in terms of audio is when you've got a slider on the screen for volume over here and a little slider on the steering wheel as well. Like you can't get away from it.
I mean, this is I guess the ultimate example of this is gesture control, you know, which you said, like BMW, I think, has been, you know, to single someone out. They went down this path of gesture control, which just doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. Like it is one of those things that car companies figured that they could do, but didn't stop and think, should we do this? Because
that'll feature. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, because you're looking at, you know, like to turn up the volume, you've got your hands on the steering wheel, and to turn up the volume, you take your hand off the steering wheel and spin it around in circles, you look like an idiot. When you could just literally move your thumb to a button that's already on the steering wheel. Like,
and so the message that you get when you adjust the volume will probably feature in another peeve that we'll get to shortly.
Yeah, like it's silly.
So look. Sorry, Matt. Go for
also, there's it's not just the designers winning the day; it's the bean counters winning the day, because screens are cheaper than buttons.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason is that so many things are put through screens now, is because it's cheaper to do it that way.
Cheaper to do it.
Run a computer, run a screen. You know, the screen should have a life of 7 to 10 years. That's the life of a car these days.
So, that's the thing. There's not too many. There's some modern cars I would not want to own in 30 years, 40 years, because it's like you're gonna need a computer science degree to fix them.
All right. Well, I'll kick in with a more general kind of philosophical view that says the car is in control, and I'll nominate 3 examples. Headlights. Okay, I want to turn the lights off or on. The car says, "Oh no, you don't. In fact, no, you can't." Tailgate. I want to open it when the engine's running. Oh, no, you don't.
No, you can't.
In fact, no, you can't. Engine, I want to turn it on with the door open. Oh, no, you don't. In fact, no, you can't. Just that kind of, I've got the controls here, not you. Now, the upside of that is that there are various safety items that will save your life, you know, and it's the car is in control. But it's the little day-to-day detail things that I find numbingly frustrating. Just, I can't believe this is the case. That kind of stuff.
There's another example when there's some Hyundais, I believe it's mainly Hyundais, might be in a few other brands as well. But if you try and put the car into drive or to drive away and you don't have a seatbelt on, which is a good safety measure. But if you are just moving your car 30 centimeters in your driveway at home, you have to put your seatbelt on so that you can, and you got to make sure the door's shut. That's another thing. If the door's open, the car won't go into drive. The electronic park brake won't disengage. So these are all, it's safety primarily, and they can sell it as a safety message, but it's also inconvenience.
And lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
Which, quite frankly, like, I just moved a car the other day where, door open, just turned it on, rolled it forward 30 centimeters. If I'd have driven off down the street with the door wide open, I'm not sure I should have a driver's license. I think it's one of those things where it's at a certain point, it's like, like there has to be a certain level of control that the person has to take responsibility.
Maybe this is a future podcast episode of how Australians are some of the worst drivers.
Whoa! Okay, let's keep moving on. Matt, number 2.
Okay, my number 2 was hard elbow rests. So there's a lot of cars in the lower price segments that they don't have padding on the bits where you put your elbows. So there's not I can't
not
really
just the lower end of this, like just not just cheap cars.
Yeah, there's Volkswagens and Audis with hard door cards on the back doors in particular. And if you're a backseat passenger, if you're an adult, you might find it annoying. I can sort of understand it if you've got kids, it's going to be easier to wipe down a hard surface than it is something that's cushy and padded. But even so, if you've got kids have elbows as well, and they might want to rest them.
When I thought, you're not wrapping these things in velour, like there are wipeable soft materials that you can have on there to protect.
Yes, it is a cost-cutting measure. There's no doubt about it. How many times have we sat in a car that's got a different door trim finish in the back door to the front door? And this is a typical European cost-cutting measure. And it's really annoying. And there are cars out there that have hard door card or elbow pads on the front door cards as well. I think some of the cheaper Kias and Hyundais might still have them. And I had a Hyundai Venue that I'm fairly sure had it, and it was like, why?
I remember going to the
3 cents to put
the VF. There was a kind of a long lead launch for VF Commodore at the Lang Lang Proving Ground. I remember getting in it and putting my elbow onto the pad, and you could feel the little gridded plastic support piece underneath the padding through the elbow. And I said to him, "Hey, what about this? My elbow's what?" And it was like it came as a surprise. But as that car arrived, it was heaps better.
Yeah, well, that was the Mustang. Famously, that was one of the main midlife upgrades was put in more soft touch material in the cabin on those touch on the, like Matt's saying, like on the elbow, really honing in on the areas that your body touches, so that it created a better a sense of quality.
Cool. Now, Steve, we'll move on to you. Thank you, Matt. You've been running a poll of your own. A family member has been taking up the cudgels here. Tell us about it.
Yeah, my daughter is in the early stages of beginning her motoring journalism career. She gives a review on every glove box of every car, now that she's old enough to sit in the front seat.
Perfect.
And really, glove boxes live up to their name. They can basically, some of these glove boxes, you'd honestly be lucky to get a set of gloves into. They are so tiny. They are, particularly, you get these phone book manuals that are stored there. And your leftover space is almost non-existent, They used to be, a practical storage alternative, like it was somewhere you could stow things. And now they're really just, that's where the manual goes, and that's it. The funniest one I realized lately was I had a Hyundai Staria Load, with its cavernous storage area. And then you open the glove box and it's absolutely tiny. It's so bizarre that they've just, such an enormous car can have such a tiny glove box.
And a commercial vehicle.
Yeah.
You'd have your receipt book. You've got everything in there. And I wonder if in passenger cars, the now almost ubiquitous little box between the front seats with the lid on it, talking of armrests,
Yeah.
If it's almost usurped the role of the glove box, and the glove box is a bit of an afterthought.
To a degree. I mean, the irony for me is, I've got a 1982 Alfa Romeo that has Alfa Sud. It's this little small hatchback, and its glove box is pretty small, but it's still probably more practical than most modern glove boxes because
I remember though,
there's some space.
The trick is in the name. It was a compartment for your gloves, and compartment is what the Americans might they might not know what a glove box is.
Steve's daughter has massive gloves. In winter, she's got those huge
baseball gloves.
Catcher's mitt.
The big foam mitts for the shearing. But I mean, it's just I think it's one of those things where, look, yes, it's in technically speaking, it is a glove box, but I think for a lot of people, it's like in the defense of Starro, it does have other small item storage around the cabin, and there is room for it. But it's not just that. It's most modern cars have really small glove boxes or glove compartments, and it seems like just a missed opportunity to add something to the practicality.
I got one thing to say about it. I had also on our YouTube community asked people what they wanted to know about my long-term Kia Sportage. And one guy was very specific about what he wanted to know, what he could fit into the glove compartment. And
wow, interesting.
It was a box of tissues, and also some plastic knives and forks and some baby wipes and something else. And, everything fit except the box of tissues. So unless you get one of those little tiny packets of tissue to take with you, it's a pretty limited storage.
I think that's what people like to use that stuff for. You like to have little bits and bobs.
I think a lot of my mates use it as a very convenient hidden from view garbage bin, which is also super handy. Now, I'll keep it going. I'm going to hit on lane keep assist. Now, valid function. I'm not really talking about the validity of the technology. I'm talking about how it's applied. And sometimes it's just a little bit too strong. And I can think of, just to single out a couple, I can think of VW Touareg, and recently I drove the BMW M440i X-Drive Grand Coupe, and the lane departure warning function was just too quick to intervene, and it was overly intrusive when it did it. So you can turn the steering wheel intervention function off, and you can dial down the steering wheel vibration warnings too. So invariably it's adjustable. I get that, but sometimes it's just so intrusive, it's hard to live with.
I 100% agree. The best example I can give is probably most modern Hyundais and Kias. Their system is particularly that lane keeping is far too intrusive. Like it constantly wants to move you around the lane. And I think the key is it's great technology. It's great. It's a great safety addition, and it's great that they've put it in there. But when you apply it incorrectly, and people just switch it off, well, then it effectively doesn't exist, right? So you have to, if you're gonna do, there's a reason seatbelts are really thin, and there's a reason why we don't put on a 5-point motor racing harness, right? Because that would be far safer, but it's inconvenient, and people wouldn't use it, So that's why they came up with the 3-point lap / belt that we have, right? So you have to apply safety in such a way that people will accept it and use it properly, like that. And that, so by, when they mess it up.
Great point.
We've got
self-defeating.
We've got a new family reviewer starting soon that if you're on YouTube, you will see some new video content from a new face very soon. But she's called out some vehicles in particular, a Kia, with a lane keeping assist that she found to be a little unnerving. And for people who aren't experienced drivers, who maybe are new drivers, L platers or P platers, or just on their full license, and they're getting a brand new car and they've got all the safety gear, and then all of a sudden they feel like they have to fight the car to keep it where they think it should be in the lane. It can be disconcerting, and you're exactly right, Steve. Fine tuning is the key. It needs to be right, otherwise it's wrong.
Otherwise, it doesn't get used. Yeah.
And I don't think it's just P platers and stuff. I think if we are used to this technology because we're jumping out of new cars all the time. But if you're coming from a car that's 5 years old that didn't have this tech, all of a sudden your car wants to steer itself. Yeah.
All right, now that's good, an excellent one, Matt. Your third and final.
It's kind of it's one that is
it's an age-old one.
It's a very limited problem, probably. But then again, I think about my parents who have a Toyota Hilux and a Citroen DS3. So when
pretty standard Australian garage, that one.
Yeah. They're the people that bought it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
One of the very few.
That's a bit cruel.
When Dad jumps into the Citroen, he always whinges that the blinkers are on the wrong side. Or if Mum jumps into the Hilux, the blinkers are on the wrong side. And we jump in, as motoring journalists, we jump into any car that we've ever driven and jump into something that's different the next day.
Let's just say the windscreens on those cars are very clean.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. It is very easy to mistakenly hit the windscreen wipers instead of the blinkers or indicators. So that's my third and final. Probably not that big of a deal, really. You do get used to it once you live with a car for, I don't know, 3 or 4 days. You should be able to figure it out. But then again, I still jump into my Sportage long-termer and accidentally hit the indicator or the wiper, depending on what I've been driving before or
Absolutely.
after. So.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you. Now, Steve,
Yes.
hit us with your third one.
Okay. I'm actually going to throw a curveball here because I know we discussed this pre-show, but just sitting here, I remembered one that actually is probably one of my greatest pet peeves, because we touched on the fake exhaust tips on electric vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that really bothers me about modern electric vehicles, particularly bespoke electric vehicles, is the giant box they put in the boot to store the cable.
Righto.
Right? It's a car designed specifically to have a cable that will charge it. Porsche Taycan.
Right.
You open the boot to that thing, and there is a box the size of 2 phone books. If people remember, sorry for young audiences, phone books are like a large... It's a really large book full of phone numbers.
That's sat under the phone that no one has anymore as well. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they just have these giant boxes that store the cable. It's like, did you not think to find somewhere to integrate the cable into the boot? Like it's one of those things that I just like, it's like, I get it if it's say something like the Kona electric, because that was originally designed to be a petrol car and they kind of reverse engineered it to be an electric car. But a bespoke electric car, and it's not just a Taycan. I think it's the same with there's several electric vehicles I've driven that have that giant box in the boot just sucking up space. Like it's so bizarre.
Tung Nguyen just drove the BMW i4 in Europe, and he was amazed that there was nowhere to store the cables for that car.
Yeah,
so they were dangling in the mesh netting on the side of the boot, like they just wave around. Like, you know, if anyone has purchased one of those cables, to buy just the regular one that you plug into a normal point to a Type 2 charger, they're like $500.
Yeah.
Wow. So you don't want them getting damaged, and you don't want to have to replace them.
Yeah. So it's just
That's
bizarre.
good.
Like, yeah.
That's good. All right. Now I'll finish it off. It's increasingly the case that modern cars, I mean, it's hard to find a car that doesn't have connectivity for Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And that function for mine is brilliant. I love it because you immediately got access to all of those apps and things, or well, most of the apps that are on your phone, you can bring up through CarPlay, and it's super easy. But I really detest a fluky connection. It all of a sudden feels like we're all beta testers, you know, that this isn't finished. This technology has just been put out there, you know, turn the car off and it's square one on restart. You know, you've previously connected the phone and it's all working beautifully. Turn the car off, start it up again. It's like, what? It doesn't go from where it was before. Different behavior at different times.
Yeah.
At one point it's working really well. Then for some unknown reason, another point it's not. Occasional pig-headed refusal to cooperate, you know, and I suppose similar to yours, Matt, you're moving from car to car. It's a problem for people that are doing that because there are different systems here and there. So,
so this is the thing. I just got out of a long-term Volkswagen, you know, had it for 3 months and thought, okay, this is an opportunity to see how this stuff works on a daily basis, and assumed that once you paired my phone to the system, to Android Auto, it would just be smooth sailing. No. But there were multiple times when it just didn't work. It's like, I'm not working today. I'm taking today off because I just don't feel like working. So you just say, it just becomes
International Android Day.
Yeah.
I had the same thing with the Skoda long-termer, Steve, that, the tech problems with that car were enough to make me say, well, I wouldn't buy this with my own money.
Yeah,
And it's that important these days to have everything at your fingertips, because everybody's always connected to their phones, and when it doesn't work,
and again, it's trying to be safe. It's trying to add a level of safety, so you're not looking at your phone, instead you're looking at your effectively inbuilt car iPad, which is arguably not any more safer, but it's again, it's that safety is supposed to make it easier. And so when it doesn't work, it's actually making life harder.
Because from an active safety point of view, what you're trying to do is lower the temperature in the cars. You're trying to make it everything as fluid and easy as possible. Yeah. So if something becomes a massive speed bump and you're frustrated and you're trying to get it work, that's quite dangerous.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you'll forgive me if I'm not ready for computers to start driving cars. They can't even operate the stereo.
Yeah.
We had others. We had about too many warnings, boot releases, all that stuff. We're not going to go there. We'll see what people make of it themselves, and we'll get your feedback on it all. But that's our round of whinges about modern cars. And we're now going to move to our garage, more modern cars. And Steve, can I kick it off with you, please? What have you been driving this week?
I have got the Genesis G70 Shooting Brake in the driveway this week. Obviously, it's the the South Korean version of a 3 Series Touring. Starts at $79,000, which is a not insignificant $16,000 more than the equivalent sedan. G70 sedan. It's got a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine, 179 kilowatts, 353 Newton meters. It's a punchy little number. Like it's got plenty of grunt. It's a bit noisy for a luxury car. It feels a bit more like a hot hatch. It looks good.
I think it looks magnificent.
It's a great looking wagon.
Yeah.
But it's good looking probably at the expense of actual practicality. As with the G70 sedan, rear legroom is not great, really, frankly, quite poor. And then obviously the boot is, not as big as you're going to get in a more conventional wagon, as opposed to sort of sleeker shooting brake design.
I can fix it all by putting a roof pod on top of it. It looks sick.
Wow.
Right.
Well, a roof pod aficionado.
But then you can put your kids in the pod.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right. Oh, you just put a slot out the front and put clear perspex in there so they can
they can
strip down.
Fly screen so they don't get bug splatter.
Well, I tell them they're doing luge.
Yeah, that's it.
Skeleton, whatever that one
is. What's it? Skeleton is head first.
Skeleton's head first, I think.
Yeah, that's nice.
Well, they can swap. They can mix it up. They can train for both.
So in summation, a little bit pricey, looks great. Practicality suffers a bit.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I think it's one of those cars for Genesis that sort of stands out. It's different, and I think that's what Genesis needs to try and do. Is just be a little bit different.
Very good, very good. Matt, can we move on to yourself, please? You've been in a Japanese product this time around. Tell us about it.
Yeah, a car that doesn't really stand out that much because a lot of people drive them. It's Toyota RAV4. The 2022 update is the one I've been driving. So some minor styling adjustments for it, new headlight inlays, new LED fog lights. Not much has changed on the inside. A couple of little things here and there, but not worth talking about. Still got the 8-inch touchscreen, which is feeling and looking a little old by modern standards, but still with the choice of that amazing hybrid powertrain, which we all know is a real world efficiency leader. There's more hybrid models this time around. There's an XSE grade, which is the mid-spec between GXL and Cruiser. 2 hybrid versions of that car, and also a top spec hybrid Edge. So not just a petrol offering at the top. I drove the GXL hybrid all-wheel drive. Personally, I think that I would go for an XSE 2-wheel drive because I don't think I'd need all-wheel drive all the time. The XSE seems like it's got the right amount of kit for the money. It's got fake leather. It's got a remote electric boot. So, there's a few little things that are a bit more upmarket than a GXL. But having said that, there's a RAV4 for pretty much anyone who wants a RAV4, except there's no diesel, there's no plug-in hybrid, there's no full electric. So there's still some things that aren't
apart from that,
yeah,
those 6 or 7 things.
That's great.
Correct
really,
me if I'm
impressed.
Correct me if I'm mistaken. But I don't think Toyota's offered an XSE variant before, have they? That's a Americanism. They've had that for years in America.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Amerification of Toyota Australia.
I wonder how long until we see an SEL, which is another Americanism. So
wow.
I don't know. I think it's just a way to fill the gap with something that's a new name that stands out, and it is an interesting offering. So
cool.
Read and watch my review at YouTube, at the site. It's all there.
Absolutely, of course. All right. Thank you, Matt. I'll wrap it up with Ford Everest Sport. So it's this one with the dual turbo engine and 4x4, $64,390. So it's the 2-litre twin turbo diesel, 10-speed auto, 157 kilowatts, 500 Newton meters, and that kicks off from 1750 RPM in typical turbo fashion. It's a 7-seater. I like the fact that it has tons of torque, lots of room. Although it's a big climb for little kids, there are side steps on the car that I tested, but it is quite high to get up and into. The electric third row is always welcome, auto tailgate. It's well equipped, it's comfy, good AC to the second and third rows, I noticed as well, vents in the roof, and it really blows well, good ventilation through a big car. The dislikes I had, it's quite noisy.
Mm-hmm.
The front seats, you've got leather, partial leather, and that's nice. But the front seats, I noticed moving around a lot. Like just wasn't super supportive in terms of keeping you located. And that's partly to do with the body control on the car. It does feel, it's not ponderous, but you get that sense that there's a lot of mass moving when you're turning the car. Steve?
Yeah, it's funny, actually. I drove a Everest Trend very recently. And was kind of taken aback because I got into it out of a Ranger. I was taken aback by just how much better it is to drive than even the Ranger, right? They've
okay.
Like it could any regular Ranger, not the Raptor, obviously, which has that better suspension. But I was surprised. Obviously, it's getting replaced later this year.
Yeah. I
was surprised. Because it's obviously right at the end of its life. I still think it's a great SUV for someone who really wants an off-road. Like if you've got it, it's it's the type of car, if you plan to do a couple of camping trips a year, and you want to get seriously off-road, but don't really want to compromise, or you want to compromise your day-to-day stuff a bit less. It doesn't feel, like you say, it doesn't feel ponderous. It obviously doesn't feel like you're driving a Mustang, but it's Focus ST. It's a big vehicle, but I think they've done a good job of combining capability with sort of everyday livability for such a big car.
Okay, that's cool. Good call. Good feedback. The other thing I thought was the car I drove is deep crystal blue, which is a super dark blue. In fact, even in half light, it starts to look black. It's so dark, and it had black rims on it, and I just wasn't sold on that combination. I probably would have gone with white or something. So totally subjective. But I think to sum up, I reckon it's a pretty cool looking family truck star. But the Sport, to your point, Steve, is probably more about the camping or the water skiing, not the actual driving. It's the car that will get you out there into the sporty stuff. Yeah. Okay, that's good. Now we will move to feedback, and it's the comment of the week on top of the shipping container at the front of the CarsGuide forecourt, surrounded with bunting and balloons and the waving men. So
wacky waving man,
inflatable arm tube guy.
Now it's our old mate Hammer Rocks, and his love affair with Crafty continues because he said Crafty hit the nail right on the head with Jimny and 70 series. Now, this is because last week we were talking about cars that sell well but maybe shouldn't. And he said Crafty hit the nail on the head with the Jimny and 70 series. He's a fan of both, particularly the 70, but I'll be the first to admit, given its price point, the LC70 is terrible value for money. Not all that comfortable in stock form and lacks safety features. Only thing going for it is its reliability, durability, and high resale value. And the used car market, the LC70 is in the same price bracket as the LC200, and the latter is an automatic. The LC200 pretty much trumps the LC70 in all areas except if you needed a ute or solid front axles. Other vehicles to put on the list, worst cars selling well, are the BMW X4 and X6. They have less cargo space than the X3 and X5 siblings. and that back-sloping roofline doesn't look all that attractive. They're basically high-riding sedans. So that was his contribution to this.
Yeah, he's right about the X4s and X6s, but that's the truth of any coupe-style SUV. And I would say that
or shooting brake.
Anyone who's bought a 70 series, typically they buy it because it's a 70 series.
Totally.
Yep. I know that it's expensive, but if you're buying 500,000 kilometers of trouble-free motoring, especially on farms or in the bush,
saw a great episode of Outback Ringers on the ABC with the 70 series with the big hook that comes out around the kind of cow's neck. That's a hard working truck.
Yeah, you know what you're getting. Right? Yeah. It's a bit like McDonald's. You know what you're going to get.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's good feedback. Thank you, Hammer. And with that, we've reached the finish line. So it's time to say thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
And thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
And thanks to our chief robot whisperer, rocket recovery technician, and after-hours dance monkey, Mr. Pritchard, for his commitment to the CarsGuide Podcast cause. Today, he's wearing a T-shirt saying, Russian dolls, they're so full of themselves.
Oh.
Oreo pants and croissant loafers. Incredible. Join into the conversation. CarsGuide's on Facebook and Instagram, or email us at comments@carsguide.com.au. Apple Podcast listeners, please take a moment to rate and review the show. 5 is the preferred number of stars. Thank you.
Sure.
If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to subscribe to the CarsGuide YouTube channel so you can stay on top of all our latest content. But before we go, look, a question. At $2.20 a litre, are you sweating when fueling up your car? Feeling nauseous when approaching the console operator to pay for it? If the answer is yes, sadly, you've contracted the car owner virus.
No.
It's very topical, that one. It's very topical.
It is topical. Thank you. Points for that.